it's very important that we don't call Venice Venice anymore. Cedric Price wants us to call it Venice. And it's very important for Cedric to think about neologism. He also encouraged us always to actually think about the new word for the word city. He thinks we shouldn't call cities cities anymore. And yesterday we actually had a long thinking process with Dominique after the panel with Dominique Gonzalez first, that we might also need a neologism for exhibitions, because as we can see from Dorothea von Hantelmann's vignettes, it's these hybrids. So maybe, and we will see that in the next vignettes, maybe we do need a neologism. That's at least probably what Cedric would suggest. It's now my immense pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Niklas Maak, German writer, architecture critic, who is the arts editor of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, has published many books, the fascinating book Le Corbusier, The Architect on the Beach. But one of the many, many aspects of Niklas's work is something which is also very central in this pavilion, which is actually this idea of protesting against forgetting and of revisiting pioneers, not in a nostalgic way, but as a toolbox. And Niklas has done an amazing work, an almost encyclopedic work of mapping pioneering architects in the 80s and 90s, has talked to many forgotten protagonists, such as Antti Lovak, and will tell us today about Cedric and Lucius, but also many other figures of that generation. Please give a very, very warm welcome to Niklas Maak.
Thank you very much, Hans-Ulrich. I would like to take this occasion here to start with a picture of a fun palace, which looks totally different from what you know under the name of a fun palace. This is a tragically unfinished, a beautifully and tragically unfinished project in France, in Tourret-sur-Loup. It's a house that, if there were right angles, would have 1,200 square meters. It was built from 1968 on the hill of Tourret-sur-Loup by an architect called Antti Lovak, and who at the time was a sculptor, and then he was asked to build a house with any plan, just to start build add one bubble to the other. So this was kind of a utopian attempt to create not a building, but an inhabitable structure that would only consist of a dome where you have palm trees growing in, and then added some cellular inhabitable units. Of course, it looks very strange, but the idea behind it was very interesting, just to start building and have an ever-growing, almost Friedrich Kiesler-esque endless house. This endless house is still an endless house. Can we have the next picture? This is the architect, who was born in 1920 or 21, so he has contradictory information about this fact, and he is the only architect in the world that I know who is living in the model of his own house, next to the house. Can we have the next picture, please? As you see on this site where this house was built from 1968 on, there is not only this house, which is still unfinished, which is partly still under construction, partly already a ruin, but he has created a kind of experimental valley where in a little valley you have up to 30 concrete cells, experimental structures like this. Next picture, please. And when in 1980 the commissioner of this big house, Antoine Godet, who was at the time head of the Paris stock market, abandoned the project, he allowed Antti Lovak to move into one of the model structures he created. This is a 60 square meter model structure, and Antti Lovak lives in this structure since 1980. So he's the only architect who's living in the model, actually, of his own house. Why am I showing this to you? Not only because the Bubble House retakes the idea of a fun palace in a very different direction, but also because Antti Lovak is the creator of an unfortunately abandoned project, which is called habitology. Habitology was the attempt to create a new science in the late 60s that would deal in another way than architects usually deal with questions of dwelling, of communal living. So you have to know this, this structure on the hill was supposed to house up to 50 people who should live there for a month or for even the whole summer. And so this was also an experimental structure dealing with the question, how can we dwell differently? And I would like to take this occasion here kind of reintroduce the term habitology to the architectural discourse, because I think, next picture please, if we look at what an average house has become, this is an example from Germany, this is the best-selling prefab massively built stone house in Germany. It's called Flair 113, and they sell tens of thousands every year. So that's where we are now in like everyday dwelling. Next picture, please. And if we take into account that the living habits, you see here, like many people are working now, laying on their bed, sending emails. So the way we live, we work, has profoundly changed. The frame for it looks more and more like houses from other centuries. So I'm showing you this strange and also a little bit cheap pictures from an advertisement that shows how we should live from Schöner Wohnen, which is a German dwelling magazine. So this is a propaganda for a certain ideal. You stay at home, you're in your bed becomes the hub for your social interaction, and you are with your laptop, you're connected. So I'm showing this picture also to say that the language we're using to describe what is a private space, what is a public space, erodes when we see pictures like that, because we cannot clearly say this is a private, intimate place, but because apparently this woman is working, is communicating there the whole day. And if she leaves the house after 12 hours of chatting, talking, sending emails, Googling things, she arguably goes from a public sphere, from a communicative sphere, to an immersive place, which is what we formerly called the public space. So this picture only to show you that all the notions we have, what is public, what is private, where are we communicating, where are we just in a state of immersion, are eroding. Antje Lobach tried to address these questions very earlyly, claiming that every day the introduction of technological devices in everyday life will change not only the language of architecture, not only the way we describe architecture, but also how we conceive architecture. So next picture, please. You know, as we're here in the Swiss Pavilion, this is a famous attempt of Atelier 5 in Switzerland to create different new inhabitable units. Next picture, please. And if you see how experimental dwellings look in Japan, this is a promising attempt to go beyond the question of privacy versus public sphere, to create new spheres. The famous Moriyama house, I don't have to explain. Next picture, where a house is really detached in a different way. I think these could be first steps towards what Antje Lobach called the habitology, a science of how we could dwell differently, how we could, in a time where most of the people are not able to afford big houses anymore. The crisis of 2008 showed, which was basically a real estate crisis, showed that the concept of the single-family home has come to an end. In the cities, as you all know, the majorities are not families, but singles, elderly people, students, people living on their own, people who raise their children on their own. So the social structure of cities has changed. The shapes of our buildings haven't changed in that way. So I think Antje Lobach's idea to create new experimental forms of collective life, of communal dwellings, are very valuable and worth to be rediscovered. And I think you could easily also, this is very boxy, and Antje Lobach's thing was very square. I think you could relate them, and you could create this new kind of a habitology. So I would invite you maybe just to take this term from poor old Antje Lobach, who is living now 94 years old, in the model of his house, just try to fill this term of habitology with new life, because I think new dwelling forms have to be discovered and investigated. So I think habitology would be a very important thing that could derive from this structure that also Antje Lobach called a new kind of fun palace, but totally different from what we know under the name of fun palace. So I have a sign saying end in 30 seconds. I think it's over. Thank you for your attention. That was really the quickest speech I ever gave, but it was a great pleasure. Thank you for your attention.